Today, let us proceed with the class. And this is your first online class as we have our summer recess now. So, um, during when the college was open, I had finished with you the history of English prose, and we did Elizabethan and Jacobean prose, and now after that, we finished Charles Lamb's essay, Dream Children and Reverie. I had given some study materials yesterday. Hopefully, they would be of help to you. Now, today, you have your ACC2 paper, and in your ACC2 paper, you have this particular section that is, and this paper is titled Academic Writing and Composition, and here you have writing summary slash substance with a critical note with a marks division of 12 plus 8. So I would take this up today, and I would try to explain to you uh, in this class some you know important steps or some of the important things that we have to do before we can attempt to write the summary or the substance of a poem. So let us proceed with this, and I would elaborate slowly, and you can take down if you want, or just listen to me. So that would also be of help to you. So firstly, when you are given a poem, when you get a poem and you have to write a summary of that poem and also a critical note at the end, what you should do at the very beginning, number one, is of course to read the poem a number of times, not just once but more than once. So obviously, uh, in order to understand the meaning of that poem, you have to read it uh, quite a few times. And often you will get the title of the poem also. Generally, what happens, the poet's name is not given. So you will get the poem and the title. And after reading the poem a number of times, it would be possible for you to understand what the poet is saying in the poem. What is the theme of the poem? So you will be able to understand that. And therefore, reading the poem a number of times is the first step that you have to undertake here. So the general theme of the poem is you can grasp through a thorough reading. Now you will find after reading the poem that you have succeeded in understanding the meaning, what the poet is saying in this poem, and uh, now you can concentrate on the main points of the poem, and you can make a kind of list, mental list. Of course, there won't be time for you to make any kind of physical list, write down, jot down the points like that, just with the pencil or anything. Just uh, make some, you know, a kind of a mental list of the important points in the poem. And while you make that list, obviously, you uh, you should refer to the text, that is the poem, and try to connect those points with the text. Now, in a poem, there might be a number of figures of speech. Figures of speech such as metaphors, simile, metonymy, synecdoche, antithesis, alliteration. All these are called figures of speech, and you have to, if you can, if it is possible for you, you have to identify them. And uh, you have to keep, the next thing that you should keep in mind is the fact that you should always write the substance of a poem in your own words. You should not uh, use phrases from the poem itself. And this applies to also the prose, passages that might be said. So you cannot write all those, sort of repeat those in your substance. So avoiding words from the original text is, as far as possible, it should be done. Now, regarding the word limit of a substance, if the poem is a long one, if it is a long one, obviously the substance would be a bit longer. But of course, like a précis, it should not be one third of the original passage. As you know, that a précis is generally one third in length of the original passage, but in the case of a substance, when you are writing a substance of the poem, uh, that is not supposed to be one third of the original passage, but you have to say, uh, sort of write down the substance or the gist of the poem in sort of half, you can say, half, a little more than that. Use those number of words in order to write down the substance. So obviously that should be your aim, and uh, one has to be concise, and a substance is what in Bengali is called sarshankhep. So it's like that. It's shorter in length. It should be obviously shorter in length from the original uh, poem, because you cannot write everything that the poet has said in the poem, but only incorporate those points which seem to be important to you. So a substance is a kind of a trans creation, a new creation in the hands of the reader, and it is a kind of a omission of the trifling details, the details which are not, you know, important. So those should be omitted. And, uh, you know, one's individual style that should be uh, adopted when one is writing the substance. Now, the next thing is, which one has to maintain while writing the substance, is maintaining clarity. So whatever you are going to write, you have to write the main thing of the passage clearly and concisely, and without any kind of complexity. So that is the first one important thing, of course. Second one is simplicity. Obviously, as I just said, there should not be any kind of complexity, because you when you are writing the substance, you are in a way sort of uh, you are clarifying something. You are in a way explaining, So the language of the substance should be simple and straightforward, and it should not there should not be any decorative language as such. Next point is neutrality. Neutrality meaning in the substance you cannot add your own comments. Always remember that a substance is a kind of a gist or a condensed version of the poem itself. So you cannot add anything of your own. Whatever the poet has said in the poem, you have to present it in a concise, in a shorter form. So you cannot invent anything in the substance. The poet has communicated some events, emotions, he has expressed some emotions. So whatever he has said, that should be communicated clearly. But nothing new or original, or original in the sense that occurs to you, that is occurring to you, and uh, something that is not there in the poem. You cannot add that in the substance. You can do that in the critical note, which you would be adding to the substance, but not in the substance itself. So you should not show any kind of prejudice towards anything. The next thing is brevity. Obviously, brevity is of the utmost importance when you are writing the substance. Uh, so as I was saying, that it is not going to be like the précis, that is one third of the original passage, and it is going to be about almost half of the original passage. Now, it can be a little less, of course. In a précis, you have to mention the number of words at the end of the uh, précis, but in the case of the substance, you do not have to mention the number of words. So it can be a little more than the one third of the passage, and about half, you can say. Now, as I had told you at the beginning, that when you are trying to write the substance, obviously you have to read the poem a number of times. And if you read the poem 3-4 times, then you will be able to understand or make some sense of the theme of the poem. And gradually the main theme of the poem will become clear to you when you read the poem a number of times. So the original expressions, whatever the poet has said, that should be your the representation of that in your substance should be your primary aim. Next comes unity, the unity of the theme, whatever has been said in the poem. So the coherence of ideas, the order in which the poet has said everything, the exact order, you should maintain that. So in the first stanza, the poem would be obviously divided into a number of stanzas. So you have to say what the poet has said in the first stanza at the beginning, and you should not bring it to the place it to the end of your substance. Of course, you should not do that. So maintain the chronology, the time frame that is, and the coherence of the ideas, the proper arrangement of the ideas should be done. Now, next point is the essence. Now, this is important because you know the uh, omission of unimportant details is obviously very important. There can be many ideas in the poem which um, would be unimportant, in the sense that they would not have a direct bearing uh, on the theme. That would They would not be so much important. So you have to omit those ideas and incorporate only the whatever is uh, important for you. So these are some of the features uh, that you have to keep in mind when you are going to write the substance of a poem. Now, after writing the substance, you have the task of writing the critical note. Uh, Now, writing the critical note is a tougher task than writing the substance of a poem, because when you are attempting a critical note, you have to be original. That is, you have to think uh, and you have to think critically. You have to think critically in order to write the critical note. And you have to incorporate all the aspects of the poem in order to write that. Now, we have to obviously, after reading the poem, you have written the substance, so you know the theme of the poem. When you are trying to write the critical note, what you should do is the first step should be to take into account the intention of the poet. Now, the intention of the poet, why the poet is writing this poem, and what is his objective, what is he trying to say in this poem. So write that down. uh, After you get the theme, you understand the theme of the poem, obviously you can comment on that, and in that way you can, in one or two sentences at the beginning of your critical note, you can write that down. So here what you have to write is the nature. You have to comment on the nature or tone of the poem, what the poem is like. So you have to comment on the theme, rather, the theme of the poem, whether it is subjective, whether there are personal elements, lyrical elements, personal elements in the poem. For example, when you were in semester 1, you were introduced to the romantic poets, and you had read some of the poems. So in the you know poems written by the romantic poets like William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, then Percy Bysshe Shelley, John Keats, uh, the romantic poets, they were all extremely personal in their writings. So, if you are given such a poem, it would be possible for you to comment on that, it has a kind of a personal, lyrical kind of a tone. If you find that there is a kind of an objective element to the poem, an objective element, then of course you have to comment on that. That is, it is impersonal. You will, if you find that not so much personal elements are there in the poem. For example, there is a kind of an observation on something, and the poet is not really expressing his own feelings in the poem, but he is describing something in a kind of an objective way. Or if the poem is didactic, D-I-D-A-C-T-I-C, meaning it has some lesson to offer to the readers, some kind of lesson that the poet is trying to convey. So it is didactic. The poet has the intention of, you know, communicating certain lessons through the poem. Or it is reflective in nature. Reflective meaning that it is full of some deeply felt thoughts. The poet has felt something deeply. He has experienced something very deeply, and he wants to give an expression to that in this poem, in his poem. So you have to comment on that. And as I said, that if it is impersonal or descriptive in nature, you can do that. Obviously, comment on that. This is the first thing that you have to do when you are writing down the critical note of this poem. Now, you must have noticed that in this question that you will be getting, write the substance or summary of a poem uh, with a critical note. You have 12 marks for the substance and 8 marks for the uh, critical note. So total is 20 marks. So you have to you'll be given marks separately. For example, if you write a good substance, you can get 60% marks uh, out of 12, and then out of 8 you can get 5, 6, like that. So obviously you have to write both the substance and the critical note equally well to get an overall good marks. Now the second step should be um, your task could be to indicate how the theme of the poem, you already have hit upon the theme of the poem when you were writing the substance, how this theme has been developed by the poet in the different parts of the poem. So it would be a kind of a very short critical analysis of the theme. So what would that contain? What would you write here? Obviously, the critical analysis of the theme would involve or include the words and expressions that have been used in the poem. You can quote some of the words which appear to be striking to you, which stand out, which appear to be quite, uh, which would have certain important bearing on the entire theme, expressing the theme. So you can do that. And the expressions, in order to write your drive home your point, and in order to analyze the poet's arguments, his point of view. So here you might mention one or two figures of speech, obviously one or two figures of speech, and which if you are able to understand what figures of speech have been used. And here the literary devices, that is the figures of speech. For example, simile, metaphor, and all the other figures of speech that you have: personification, metaphor, litotes, irony, climax, anticlimax. So you should have a clear idea of the definition of the different figures of speech. What is the figures of speech of uh, synecdoche, for example. If you do not know the definition and some of the examples, obviously it would be difficult for you to write, or if you are able to identify, you won't be able to identify figures of speech. Now, after doing this, the next step would be focusing your attention on the diction of the uh, poem. Diction meaning the use of the words, what kinds of words have been used. So here you can make an kind of an analysis of the uh, if there are monosyllabic words or polysyllabic words. Monosyllabic meaning uh, words containing one syllable. Polysyllabic, of course, which have different more than one syllable, 3 or 4 syllables. And you can mention the diction of the poet here and how that diction matches the purpose of the poem, the theme of the poem. And lastly, the last step that you have to take in order to write the critical note of the poem is, of course, concentrate on the structure and versification of the poem. So you have to identify whether the poem is a sonnet. If it has 14 lines, you know what a sonnet is. A sonnet is a poem of 14 lines. If the poem has 14 lines, obviously it is a sonnet. Now there are two types of sonnets in the English tongue, the Petrarchan sonnet and the Shakespearean sonnet. So the Petrarchan sonnet, it was used by the Italian poet Petrarch, and the Shakespearean sonnet was, of course, popularized by William Shakespeare himself. Uh, there, uh, there are certain differences in these two sonnets, forms of sonnets. Both are of 14 lines, obviously, but in a Petrarchan sonnet, there is a division or caesura, as it is called, Caesura, after the 8th line. So in a Petrarchan sonnet, you will find a kind of a caesura or a kind of a break, and then the next 6 lines are there. And what the poet has been talking about or saying in the first 8 lines, there is a kind of a break or a kind of a discontinuation or a kind of a clarification. So it's like that. But in a Shakespearean sonnet, uh, there are 4 stanzas. Uh, there are sorry, there are the last 2 couplets are there. 2 couplets where the idea is summed up. So a kind of you have 3 4-line stanzas, so that makes 12 lines, and the concluding 2 lines. So uh, 3 quatrains and a concluding couplet. So that is the Shakespearean form, or the English sonnet as it is called. And the Petrarchan form is the Italian sonnet, because Petrarch was an Italian poet, and the sonnet, as you know, it was brought to England by Sir Thomas Wyatt and the Earl of Surrey. You have read about them in your history of English poetry. So this is the task, whether the poem is in the sonnet form or whether it is a ode, a small kind of portion from an ode, You know what an ode is. It is a kind of an address to something or someone, or whether it is a lyric. A lyric is a short a poem full of personal feelings and emotions. It is not generally of 14 lines, but maybe shorter. And a ballad, of course, a ballad is a long poem, long narrative poem describing some events, some kind of events. Uh, it Since it's a long poem, it would not be set, not be given, I hope. And there are certain modern poems which do not rhyme. Actually, they are not rhymed poems, but um, they are different. So obviously you will be able to understand the nature of the poem when you read it, whether it is a sonnet, whether it is a lyric, or it's kind of nature of an ode, or it is a modern poem which has certain modern uh, words, phrases. And if it has certain other, you will be able to understand certain other obsolete words are there, words which are no longer used in the modern English. uh, then you will be able to understand that this poem was actually, it belongs to the Elizabethan or the Jacobean period in the 16th century. It was written in that period by either Shakespeare or one of his contemporaries. So it's like this. So obviously, these are some of the important, uh, things that you have to uh, comment on. And another thing which is also important when you are looking at the figures of speech, another thing is trying to look at the imagery or symbols used in the poem. That is another important thing. So obviously imagery is a kind of a central thing in all literature, and it is one of the chief elements in poetry. So there are broadly two different types of imageries, literal imagery or figurative imagery. So literal imagery is of course descriptive, which evokes different mental images arising out of our five senses. So our five senses, that is sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, uh, the five sense organs, and the uh, how we use them. So uh, if you the images which are related to sight are called visual images, VISUAL. Those related to sense of hearing are auditory images, AUDITORY. Those related to smell are olfactory images, OLFACTORY. Those related to taste are gustatory images, GUSTATORY. And those related to touch are tactile images, TACTILE. So there are two other types of images, that is organic images, which can be related to the awareness of pulse or breathing, and another important type of imagery called the kinesthetic, that is KINES THETIC. So that is related to movement or muscle tension, like that. In the poems of Shelley, you will find different type of imagery. That is a kind of a transferred imagery, and that is called synesthetic imagery, synesthesia or synesthetic, SYNESTHESIA, where one kind of imagery is transferred to another. So you can find this in Ode to the West Wind or To a Skylark, Shelley's poems. So in simple language, what is an imagery? If you are asked, you have to say that an image is a uh, kind of a visual or physical representation of something. For example, a photograph or a mental picture of some visible thing or things. So images can involve senses other than sight and sensations. So it can be mental imagery or literal imagery. So these are some of the things that you have to keep in mind when you are going to write the critical note of a poem. Now, uh, I'll end the class today here because in my next class with you, I will give you I'll give you a poem, and actually I'll post it earlier and before the class, so that you get time to read that poem, and uh, then in the next class we will discuss how to write the substance of that poem and also add the critical note of that poem. So uh, you can read it yourself, and you can form your own ideas, and even if you are able, you can attempt to write the substance, and you can show it to me, or you can just send it to me. So uh, we will do that in our next class. So if you have any question till now what I have told you, you can ask me. Otherwise we will of course end this class. So regarding the writing of the substance of a poem and writing the critical note, after we do a few examples, uh, from poems, different poems, then we'll move on to the writing the substance of a prose passage and writing the critical note of that, because there are slight differences between writing the substance of a poem and that of a prose passage. So obviously we have to do that separately. So I think you do not have any questions, so we can end this class here.